Shavua Tov, I believe it is important for Jacob to be Jacob and not anybody else. I believe we must be people who are in God's image rather than people who attempt to define God in our own image. And finally, I think that solutions to anti-Semitism are clearly given in this week's Torah reading. So let's go. The story at the end of the reading is bewildering on many levels. Isaac has gone blind. He's preparing to give the blessing to his older son, older by a few minutes, to Esav. Rebekah knows that Esav is not worthy, and so she sends Jacob in instead to get the blessing. Jacob dresses up as Esav, with hairy skins that his mother prepared for him on his forearms, and goes into his father. But Isaac is puzzled. Who is this person? When he hears him, he says the voice is the voice of Jacob. But when he feels the skins that Rebekah had prepared and thinks that it's the boy's actual arms, he says the hands are those of Esav. The voice of Jacob, the hands of Esav. Who to believe? There's a doubt here, but Isaac conquers his doubts and gives the blessing to Jacob. Now immediately after Jacob leaves, who comes in? The real Esav. And when he hears what happened, he bitterly asks, after having a meltdown, "Do you have no other blessing left for me, my father?" And Isaac answers, "Not really." And then he gives him a second place blessing. So many questions. Let's focus on a few. First of all, why was Isaac determined to bless Esav and not Jacob? It was clear that Esav was not nearly as righteous as Jacob. So why is Isaac favoring Esav? And Esav, we will see, is not just not as righteous as Jacob. He's got some serious issues. He was willing to sell his birthright to Jacob for some lentil soup. And later on, after this whole blessing thing, he says the following charmer: "The days of my father's mourning period shall come close, and then I will kill my brother Jacob." This is the guy that Isaac wants to bless. And another question. It's really the question that Esav himself asks. Does Isaac have only one blessing to give? When Jacob is going to die later on in life, later on in the book, he gives blessings to all of his sons. I once had the honor to go to 770 Eastern Parkway and see the Lubavitcher Rebbe give blessings and dollars to hundreds of people. So why does it seem like there's only one blessing in this entire story, that either one gets it or the other gets it, but they can't both get blessings? Strange. Finally, when Jacob is there in the room and Isaac has that doubt, he has to decide between the voice of Jacob and the hands of Esav to identify who the person is. He chooses to believe the hands and not the voice. Why? Or why doesn't he just investigate a little further? Is he giving this blessing despite his doubts? Or is he giving it because of this seeming contradiction? Intriguing. I believe the answer is leadership. Leadership is what this is all about. It's not about prosperity or wealth. It's about who is going to lead the preservation of the Abrahamic faith and the foundation of what would become the nation of Israel. There's only one leadership role, and who is going to be the one to get it? Isaac thought the best option was Esav, even though he wasn't perfect. But Isaac didn't know that Esav had a very dark place in his soul, something similar to some of the popular media personalities who seem to have turned against Israel and, it seems, common sense. But Isaac made a different calculation. He knew he had two sons, and he knew that Jacob was by far the more righteous of the two, who dwelt in the tents, who, as it were, was studying Torah the whole time. But being righteous does not always mean that one can survive in a very volatile and hostile world. Isaac had encountered a new thing, anti-Semitism, at the hands of Avimelech, the king of the Philistines. We'll talk about that in a minute. But for now, Isaac wanted to make sure that the leader was going to be someone who could survive, who knew how to fight, and he was afraid that Jacob, for all his piety, was too naive and innocent to survive. He'd be swallowed alive by all the Avimelechs and other haters in the world. According to the great Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, Isaac knew that Esav did have shortcomings, but he also hoped that giving him the blessing and the leadership would galvanize his good character traits and make him righteous. We all know of wild kids who grew up, got married, and became exemplary parents. Give Esav responsibility and he will rise to the occasion. Hopefully. But he was wrong. And Rebekah knew the true darkness of Esav, and so she intervened to prevent this tragedy from happening. Jacob had to receive the blessing. But why was Isaac wrong? Maybe he could transform Esav? The answer is he couldn't, because Esav was somebody who defined God in his own image. When he said to Jacob upon selling the birthright, "I'm going to die, of what use is this birthright to me?" he was spilling all the beans. The birthright didn't just mean a monetary inheritance. It meant the spiritual leadership and the service of God. The firstborns were supposed to be the Kohanim before the Kohanim were chosen to replace them. And so Esav was going to be like the high priest. Now Esav would be happy to be religious if it gets him what he wants. But at that moment, when he was thirsty after a day out in the fields killing and raping and who knows what elsing, he didn't care about a birthright. It brought him nothing for him now. Lentil soup brought him what he wanted right now. That's the type of person he was. There's an interesting and I think important battle being waged on the Christian right these days. People like Tucker Carlson are proclaiming their hatred for Christian Zionists. Now, truly religious Christian Zionists understand that the Jewish people in Israel are integral parts of the Bible. But the opponents of this view find verses in the New Testament expressing frustration with the Jews for not accepting their Messiah. And based on that, they reject the whole concept of anything being Judeo-Christian. This, despite the fact that the overwhelming biblical thrust of God's love for the nation of Israel is clear. What they are doing is what Esav did, defining God in their own image, stating what they think God should have said and probably meant, and using religion as a form of competition rather than as a source of spirituality. Esav did that. That's Esav, using religion as something to give him benefit, not because he believed truly in what he was professing. And Rebekah knew it, but Isaac didn't see it. So now we can understand what Isaac was aiming for. The voice of Jacob was always sweet to Isaac. Jacob had faith, Jacob had sterling character. But it's not the vocal sound that defines Jacob's voice, which is what we're talking about here. It's referring to what he says. Jacob speaks like a tzaddik. Would that Esav should start speaking like a tzaddik and develop such character and faith. And now, from Isaac's perspective, this person comes in for a blessing, claiming to be Esav, says something incredible. When Isaac asks this supposed Esav how he caught the food so quickly, the answer surprises and thrills him. Because God brought this animal before me. God did it. Who talks like that? Jacob. But this guy is Esav. So did Esav just say this? Wow, amazing. Isaac was amazed. Esav has found faith. Isaac's intention that the blessing should raise Esav up to righteousness seems to indeed have already happened. So Isaac does not bless despite the doubt, but because he is sure that this is Esav, and the Esav in front of him has learned how to speak like Jacob. A dream come true. And then the real Esav comes in. Bang! Isaac is shocked. Who was just here? He realizes there's only one other option, and then he proclaims something immensely important. Whoever came here, he shall also be blessed. Isaac just did a 180. He became thrilled in the other direction, that Jacob had grown the hands of Esav, that Jacob wasn't naively sitting in the study hall, but was out taking responsibility for the future of the Jewish people. He shall be blessed. And by contrast, Esav now has a complete meltdown, and it will conclude with his secret determination to kill his brother as soon as Isaac is out of the way. Whew, that was close. Now, I mentioned anti-Semitism, and so I want to focus on that for a moment. Isaac experienced it for the first time with the Philistines. When he became very wealthy there, they resented him, and they started stopping up all of his wells that he had dug, even though those wells were clearly a blessing to the whole land. Reminds me of the hothouses in the Gaza Strip that the Israelis left behind for the Gazans when they left in 2005, and the Gazans came in and destroyed them, because hatred is a self-destructive disease. Anyway, finally at Rehovot, Isaac digs a well, which remains uncontested, thank God. And then God comes to him in a prophecy and promises him the land, that he is indeed the heir, the spiritual heir to Abraham. And then guess who shows up? Avimelech, the king of the Philistines, and his senior staff. Now, surprised to see him, but being a man without guile, Isaac now spoke plainly and clearly to Avimelech. Why have you come to see me when you have hated me? He doesn't pull his punches. And here's where the anti-Semite tells us what will stop him from being an anti-Semite. Says Avimelech, because I saw that God is with you. I saw that God is with you. That's it. That's straight out of the book of Deuteronomy, where the Torah says, all of the nations of the land shall see that the name of the Lord is called upon you, and they shall fear you. When Jews have the name of God emblazoned on their foreheads, so to speak, the haters will come and sue for peace. Avimelech wants to make a peace treaty with Isaac, because Isaac is godly. And they take a mutual oath of mutual respect. The place is going to be named Be'er Sheva, which means the oath of the well of the oath, in memory of that momentous occasion. So let's go back to Jacob. Yes, it's true, his impersonation of Esav did bring the blessing, but it also brought a grievous consequence, a consequence that lasted for millennia. Esav is now the bitter enemy of Jacob and will be for a very long time. We do believe in the future Esav and Jacob will reconcile, and we do hope that that's happening even now. But now is still a few millennia after then. So let's think, what would have happened had Jacob gone in not as Esav, but as himself? See, this is the beauty of the stories of the Torah. Rarely does the Torah editorialize and tell us what to think. It tells us the story, it tells us the consequences, and we have the right and responsibility to dig in and learn the lessons. And those lessons can be critical of some of the decisions that our forebears made. That's not heresy. Many of the commentators frequently second-guess the actions of our patriarchs in different places. Even the rabbis of the Talmud learn what not to do from some of these stories. Now, I can also propose that Rebekah never intended for Jacob to put on a charade. It was Jacob's idea, not hers. Her first instruction to Jacob is simply to bring the goats and go in and get the blessing. She never said a word about a costume. Only when Jacob expressed fear that his father might think he's not Esav, and assumed that if he's not Esav, that's a deal breaker, did she indulge him with the costume idea, anything to get him there quickly because time was of the essence. But this was the sad thing, that Jacob didn't feel worthy, that he couldn't imagine that going in as Jacob would bring him any blessing. He felt a need to be someone else to get that blessing. Isaac, with Avimelech, was authentic, and in the end he triumphed. Sadly, we have many Jews who dress up as Esav, as it were, who try to be more non-Jewish than the non-Jews, and some of them are even in prominent places, proclaiming ideologies that are far from those of the Torah. Some have become out-and-out self-haters, and they think that maybe by doing so they'll get the blessing of the non-Jews. They are sadly mistaken. A couple of weeks ago I quoted the words of the great Rabbi Meir Simcha of Devinsk, who describes the Jews in Germany who believe that, quote, Berlin is now Jerusalem. And they don't know, wrote Rabbi Meir Simcha, that fearsome storm clouds will gather, and a great tempest will overcome them. And he wrote those words decades before the Holocaust, at a time when Jews truly were thriving in Germany. So this is the only prescription that can neutralize anti-Semitism and turn it even into philo-Semitism, having the name of God upon us, living as authentic Jews. When Jacob is proud to be Jacob, his name will then change to become Israel, which means you have struggled with God and with man, and you have prevailed. We will gain the love and admiration of the nations of the world when we live as authentic Jews, sanctifying God's name with our actions and personifying faith with everything that we do. The end will be like Isaac, and the Avimelechs of the world will come to us and say, let us live together in peace. Let us swear that we shall behave in brotherhood. May that day be soon.